So in topic one, we talked about how ecology is the scientific study of the interactions between and among organisms and their environments. We said that there are patterns to distribution and abundance, and that there must be causes for these patterns. In this topic, we're going to look at some of the factors that can influence and create some of these patterns. In looking at this list of ecological factors, let me say that this list includes 4 ecological factors. They conveniently start with the letters A, B, C, and D. I sometimes refer to these as the ecological ABCs. So let's start with the first one. A stands for abiotic, and abiotic means non-living. In any ecosystem, there are going to be several non-living components that can influence what lives there and how well it does. Some of these abiotic factors include temperature, moisture, soil chemistry, slope, aspect, elevation, and disturbance. And it's pretty obvious how temperature and moisture and even soil chemistry can influence what lives where and why. Most organisms simply have certain tolerances that they prefer and do well at when it comes to temperature and moisture. To underscore the importance of abiotic factors, let me use one of the others that's possibly not so apparent, and that is aspect. Aspect is the direction that a slope is facing, north, south, east, or west, or some variation thereof. So, as we've said all along, organisms are not distributed randomly over the face of the earth. They're patterns, and there are causes of these patterns. And in our study of what lives where and why, there are going to be things in the environment that determine these patterns, and aspect is a really good example. To illustrate, this picture here is taken from a peak just to the east of Table Rock Mountain in northern Pickens County. This is the peak that's sometimes referred to as the Stool, where in Native American legend the giant spirit sat to eat his dinner on the top of the flat-topped Table Rock Mountain. But anyway, from the top of Table Rock looking east, you can see the Stool, and in summer, this is not a very good picture, but you can see that the vegetation is fairly uniform. There aren't any distinguishable patterns, and everything looks pretty uniform. Well, if you go back in the winter and look in the same direction, you can see that there are some patterns. In this line here that pretty much delineates the north side from the south side, you can see that there is a distinct difference in the understory and shrub layer vegetation. On the north side, you've got some evergreen species, probably a species of rhododendron, rhododendron minus, also known as Carolina rhododendron. And on the south-facing slope, you see that it is just not doing quite as well. Well, the reason for that is in the northern hemisphere, the sun is never directly overhead. It's always a little bit to the south. In winter, it's really low in the sky to the south. That causes south-facing slopes to get more direct and more intense sunlight year-round, and that can cause south-facing slopes to be warmer and drier, and that often is enough of a difference to influence some species. In this case, this species of rhododendron. So to further illustrate the importance and the role of aspect, if you look at the other two pictures on the right side of the screen here, these pictures were taken just a couple of minutes apart of a picnic shelter that has 4 sides to the roof, and each side faces one of the cardinal directions, north, south, east, or west. These pictures were taken just a day or so after one of our snowfall events in the upstate of South Carolina. So A day after snowfall, you can see that the south and west facing slopes that get more direct and more intense sunlight have no snow left, because these faces are several degrees warmer than the north and the east facing slopes, which a day or two after snowfall still have snow on them, and you can see that they are shaded, and the south and west facing slopes are sunnier and consequently warmer and drier. So this probably represents a difference of several degrees, and when you're talking about organisms in an ecosystem, a difference of several degrees can be a deal breaker and can play a pretty significant role in how well a species does, and that seems to be the case here. So we'll eventually talk about additional abiotic factors and how they can influence distributions and abundances as we get out in the field. In addition to abiotic factors, you also have biotic factors, which are living factors, things like competition with other species for limited resources, predation, symbioses, species living in close relationship with other species, food availability, and also disease. All of those are living factors that can play a pretty significant role in some of the patterns that we see. In the ecological ABCs, the C stands for chance. There are simply some factors that can be either abiotic or biotic that are random in nature. Things like natural disasters, fires, floods, storms, other types of disturbance that can significantly influence distributions and abundances. Finally, the D stands for dispersal. In order for a species to be in an area, it has to get there in the first place. And this takes place via wind, animals, water, any number of means can lead to a species actually being in an area in the first place. So whenever you ask the question, why is this species here, or why is this species not here, it's usually going to be some combination of these four factors. And what ecologists try to do is figure out what combination of those factors are influencing those patterns that you see. In addition to those four factors, there are four ecological concepts that typically arise from the ecological ABCs. You've got habitat, which is the physical surroundings where an organism may be found. It's usually based on tolerances and preferences of those ecological factors. You have limiting factors, which are factors that control abundance and or distributions of organisms. And then you have adaptations, which are characteristics that organisms have that enable them to be better suited to certain environmental conditions that arise from these factors. These adaptations are typically genetic. They come about through natural selection, and they may involve structural, physiological, and or behavioral traits. The pictures to the right illustrate each one of these. For example, habitat. If you want to see waterfowl, then you're going to have to go to a place, obviously, that has a lot of water. Limiting factors, a good example from my research is the influence of soil calcium on determining land snail abundance. Calcium can sometimes be limiting for snails because they have to have calcium for shell production, and calcium is not super abundant across the landscape. It's patchy, and that can influence the distribution and abundances of land snails. And then finally, the third picture simply shows the ability of some species to adapt and blend in with their environments. This is a picture here of a copperhead and how it blends in with leaf litter, which is where it spends most of its time. And they blend in extremely well, and this is going to increase their abilities to thrive and do well in that particular habitat. Finally, just to underscore the importance of ecology again, ecology's got a long history as a descriptive science. This is sometimes referred to as natural history, learning the names and distributions and habits of plants and animals. But ecology is also a very rigorous experimental science, and it has come of age in the last 50 to 60 years. There are several significant studies that have been done that are empirical in nature. They involve manipulations of factors to see how these factors influence distributions and abundances, and it is a very rigorous scientific discipline now, more so than early on when it was simply descriptive in nature. Ecology also integrates all areas of biological research and informs environmental decision making. Ecology incorporates chemistry, physics, molecular biology, genetics, as well as environmental science and things like that. And for that reason, ecology provides the scientific understanding that can underlie certain environmental issues. For example, bottom right picture you see here, dissolved oxygen levels in the Gulf of Mexico right adjacent to the coast, especially near the mouth of the Mississippi River, are extremely low. It's sometimes referred to as a dead zone. And we'll talk about in class some of the reasons for this, but ecology helps us determine those patterns and determine causes of these patterns, and those can sometimes serve to be the basis for political decisions and public relations decisions and things like that. So ecology obviously plays a very important role in modern science.